The steam from the chamomile tea curled into the air, carrying a faint, metallic scent that didn't belong. My husband, Mark, pushed the mug across the granite island with a smile, so practiced it made my skin crawl. "You've been so stressed, Lydia. Drink. It'll help you sleep." I looked into his eyes and saw the hunger there. He wasn't waiting for me to rest. He was waiting for me to disappear. I caught the reflection in the stainless steel microwave. A tiny smear of white residue on the rim of his mug, the one he intended to keep for himself. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. The man I'd slept next to for 10 years was trying to erase me. My hands felt cold despite the warmth of the kitchen. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching into eternity. I knew that if I drank from that mug, everything I'd worked for would vanish. My daughter's future, my inheritance, my life, all of it would disappear while I lay unconscious. But Mark didn't know that I'd been watching him. He didn't know that I'd already figured out his plan. And he definitely didn't know what I was about to do next. "Wait," I gasped, pointing toward the front door with a shaking hand. "Did you hear that? I think someone's at the porch." Mark frowned, his eyes darting toward the hallway with sudden alertness. The second his head turned, my hands moved with the precision of a card shark. Clink. The mug swapped places in one smooth motion. He turned back, seeing nothing but his wife, looking frail and tired just like he expected. "Probably just the wind," he muttered, his voice dismissive. He watched with bated breath as I lifted his drugged tea to my lips. His eyes tracked every movement, waiting for the moment when the sedative would take hold. I took a deep, theatrical swallow, letting the warm liquid slide down my throat. "You're right," I whispered, my voice already fading as I set the mug down. "I do feel heavy." I watched his face transform. Relief washed over his features, followed by something darker, anticipation. He thought he'd won. He thought I was already slipping away into unconsciousness, but the only person who would be sleeping tonight was him. The irony was almost beautiful. In his arrogance, Mark had just poisoned himself, and he had absolutely no idea. Before we continue, I would like to know where you're watching from in the comment section. Also hit the subscribe button and share this video, as this will help this video to travel far so others can learn also. My name is Lydia Miller and I'm 42 years old. For a decade, I was the woman who built Mark's world from the ground up. I managed the books for his construction firm, balancing accounts and chasing down payments when clients tried to skip out. I raised our daughter, Emma, making sure she had everything she needed while Mark focused on growing the business. And I funneled my $450,000 inheritance from my late father into our joint account to keep us afloat during his bad luck streaks. I thought we were a team, partners facing life's challenges together. I believed in us. But 3 days ago, everything changed. I found a receipt for a burner phone tucked inside his gym bag, along with a bottle of crushed sedative hidden in a sock. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him like some emotional mess. Instead, I went to the hardware store and bought a hidden camera. I installed it in the kitchen, disguised as a regular wall clock. If Mark wanted a sleeping wife, I'd give him a performance worthy of an Oscar. I would play dead while gathering every piece of evidence I needed to bury him. I stumbled toward the sofa in our living room, my limbs heavy, dragging a blanket over myself with exaggerated difficulty. Within 10 minutes, I let my breathing go rhythmic and deep, mimicking the pattern of someone in drug-induced sleep. From under my lashes, I watched the shadow move across the room. Mark didn't check on me with a kiss or a gentle touch. He didn't whisper sweet reassurances or tuck the blanket around my shoulders. Instead, he grabbed his laptop from the dining table and sat down just 3 feet away from my supposedly unconscious body. The blue light from the screen hit his face, turning his features into a jagged mask of greed. His eyes gleamed with something cold and calculating. Finally, he hissed under his breath, his fingers flying across the keys with practiced speed. I watched him log into our joint account, the one holding my daughter's future, my inheritance, everything we'd built together. His shoulders were tense with excitement, like a predator about to feast. The man I'd loved for 10 years had transformed into someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could poison his own wife without a second thought. Someone who valued money more than marriage, more than family, more than me. The silence of the house was punctuated only by the aggressive click 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 of the mouse. Each click felt like a nail being driven into a coffin. I felt a cold rage settle deep in my marrow, spreading through my veins like ice water. He was doing it. He was actually draining every single cent from our account. But Mark didn't know about the trap I'd set. I'd spent the last 2 days working with my friend Rebecca, a forensic accountant who specialized in financial fraud cases. Together, we created a honeypot trap, a mirrored account that looked exactly like our real joint account, but was actually a digital dead end. Every transaction Mark made was being recorded and traced. Mark chuckled, a low, guttural sound of triumph that made my stomach turn. "See ya, Lydia," he whispered to the screen, as if saying goodbye to my sleeping form. He thought he was a ghost, invisible and untraceable. He thought he'd covered every track perfectly, but he didn't realize that I was the one haunting him now. I was the shadow he should have feared. And by tomorrow morning, he would understand exactly how badly he'd miscalculated. I woke up at 8 o'clock in the morning, moving slowly and clutching my head like it was about to explode. My performance had to be perfect, confused, groggy, vulnerable. Mark was already in the kitchen, whistling a cheerful tune as he flipped pancakes on the griddle. He looked refreshed, like a man who had just shed a heavy burden. His shoulders were relaxed, his movements light and easy. "Sleep well, honey?" he asked, his voice dripping with fake concern that made my skin crawl. He even smiled at me, that same practice smile from last night. "I feel like I hit a wall," I groaned, watching him carefully through half-closed eyes. "My head is pounding." He reached out to pat my hand, but I felt the tremor in his fingers. He was vibrating with the excitement of a thief who thinks he got away with the perfect crime. He poured me orange juice, made me toast, played the role of the concerned husband flawlessly. But I could see the truth dancing in his eyes. He thought I was broken. He thought I'd wake up to find everything gone and simply fall apart. Little did he know, I was counting every second until his world came crashing down. "Mark, something's wrong." I screamed from the home office an hour later, my voice raw with manufactured panic. I let the terror sound primal and real. He ran in from the living room, playing the role of the confused protector perfectly. His face was a mask of concern and confusion. "The account, it's at zero. Everything is gone. Our savings, my inheritance, everything." I collapsed to my knees on the carpet, burying my face in my hands so he wouldn't see the lack of actual tears. My shoulders shook with fake sobs. He knelt beside me immediately, his breath smelling of maple syrup and betrayal. "Oh my God, Lydia. We've been hacked. This is terrible." His voice trembled with false shock. "Don't worry, I'll call the bank right now. We'll fix this." He was so good at it, so convincing. He almost made me believe him, even though I knew the truth. He pulled out his phone, making a big show of dialing. "Yes, this is Mark Miller. Our account has been compromised." I watched him through my fingers, studying every micro expression. He was enjoying this. He was savoring my supposed devastation. And that made what was coming next even sweeter. While Mark was on the phone with the bank in the backyard, pacing and gesturing dramatically, I slipped into the garage through the kitchen door. My heart pounded as I searched quickly and quietly. I found it tucked behind the winter tires in the corner, a black duffel bag, partially hidden under an old tarp. Inside were his passport with fresh stamps I'd never seen, $5,000 in crisp cash he'd been skimming from the business for months, and a photo of a woman I didn't recognize. She was young, probably in her late 20s, with blonde hair and a bright smile. She was wearing a silver necklace I'd seen on our credit card statement 6 months ago, the one Mark said was a client gift. The stake in my heart twisted painfully, but I didn't break down. I couldn't afford to fall apart now. Instead, I pulled out the small GPS tracker I'd bought yesterday and carefully tucked it into the lining of the bag, making sure it was invisible. I zipped everything back up exactly as I'd found it and crept back into the house. Knowledge was power, and I was collecting weapons. Mark's mother, Evelyn, arrived that afternoon to comfort us during our supposed crisis. She swept into the house wearing her expensive perfume, and designer handbag. But she didn't look sad or concerned. She looked like she was mentally redecorating, already shopping for new furniture in her head. Well, Lydia, she sighed, sipping the tea I'd made sure was completely clean. Maybe this is a sign from the universe. You were always so careless with the finances. Mark should have handled everything from the start. A man understands money better. I gripped my mug until my knuckles turned white, fighting the urge to throw the hot liquid in her smug face. She knew. The way she looked at Mark, that proud, conspiratorial glint in her eyes, confirmed she was the architect of his enormous ego. She'd probably been encouraging this betrayal from the beginning. I did my best, I said quietly, playing the defeated wife. I suppose I wasn't good enough. Evelyn patted my hand condescendingly. There. At least you have Mark to fix this mess. She smiled at her son like he was her greatest accomplishment. If only she knew what I had planned for both of them. That night, I retreated to the bedroom early, claiming I needed to lie down and process everything. Once the door was closed, I pulled up the app on my phone connected to the hidden camera. The feed was crystal clear. Mark and Evelyn were whispering in the kitchen, their heads close together like conspirators. Did you move it to the offshore account? Evelyn asked, her voice low but audible. It's in transit, Mark replied, pouring himself a celebratory scotch from the bottle he kept hidden in the pantry. By the time she realizes the bank can't find the hackers, we'll be in the Caribbean. She's too broken to fight. She'll probably just accept it and move on. My jaw tightened as I listened. They weren't just stealing my money. They were stealing my dignity, my agency, my entire sense of self. They thought I was weak. They thought I was some doormat who would simply roll over and accept being destroyed. Evelyn laughed, a cold sound that made my blood boil. I always knew you married beneath you, darling. But at least her inheritance was useful. I saved the video file, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. A new player entered the frame on my hidden camera feed. Mark's brother, Toby, burst into the kitchen looking frantic and disheveled. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Mark, the investors are calling me nonstop. If I don't get that $200,000 by Friday, they're coming for the warehouse. They said they'd burn it down. Mark waved him off dismissively, not even looking up from his phone. Relax, Toby. Stop being so dramatic. Lydia's inheritance is covering it all. The money's already moving. Just keep your mouth shut and stay out of sight for a few days. Toby looked relieved, his shoulders sagging. You're sure she won't figure it out? She's sleeping 16 hours a day thanks to the sedatives, Mark said with a cruel smile. By the time she wakes up properly, we'll all be set. I realized then that my marriage wasn't a partnership. It was a piggy bank for an entire family of losers and criminals. They'd all been feeding off me like parasites, and I was done being their host. Mark came upstairs later that evening, carrying a glass of red wine on a small tray. To help you relax, LYDS. We'll get through this together, I promise. His voice was syrupy sweet, but his eyes were cold. I looked at the glass carefully. There were tiny bubbles clinging to something undissolved at the bottom, small white particles that hadn't quite mixed in. He was getting sloppy in his confidence, less careful. He wanted me out of commission again so he could finalize the refinancing of our home, the final theft that would leave me with nothing. As I reached for the glass, I pretended to trip on the corner of the bedroom rug. The wine splashed dramatically across the cream carpet, spreading in a dark red stain. Oh, Mark, I'm so sorry. I'm such a clumsy mess. I wailed, dropping to my knees. The look that crossed his face for one brief second was pure, unadulterated fury. His mask slipped, and I saw the real Mark, the man who wanted me gone. But he caught himself quickly, forcing his features back into concern. It's okay, honey. Accidents happen. I'll get you another glass. No, I said quickly. I'm too shaky. I should just sleep. His disappointment was almost visible. While Mark was at the bank the next morning, though the GPS tracker showed him actually at a jewelry store downtown, I sat at my computer with purpose. I opened an encrypted email account Rebecca had helped me set up. Then I composed a very detailed, very anonymous tip to the IRS regarding Toby's construction investments and the $200,000 influx that was about to hit his business accounts. I attached Mark's digital signature to the fabricated transfer records that showed him as the one laundering money through Toby's company. I included dates, account numbers, and wire transfer receipts. Everything was documented perfectly. If they wanted to play with my money, they could play with the federal government too. I hit send and felt a grim satisfaction. The IRS doesn't forget, and they definitely don't forgive. Within days, they'd be crawling all over Toby's warehouse and his business records. And when they traced the money back to Mark, the house of cards would start tumbling down. I made myself a cup of coffee, clean, safe coffee, and waited for the dominoes to fall. Lydia, honey, Mark said that evening, sliding a thick stack of papers toward me across the dining table. His expression was serious, almost paternal. Since the account is frozen while the bank investigates, we need to take a small equity loan on the house, just to cover the bills and keep things running. It's temporary. He pointed to the signature line with his pen, tapping it twice. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. If I signed these papers, I lost the house. He'd structured the loan to default immediately, giving him grounds to sell. If I didn't sign, the game was up and he'd know I suspected something. I looked him dead in the eye, letting a moment of silence stretch between us. I'll sign it, Mark, but only if we put Evelyn's name on the deed as a guarantor. For extra security. I watched confusion flicker across his face, followed by calculation. He thought he was getting double the collateral, 2 properties for the price of one. He was actually signing his mother's house over to me. That's actually brilliant, he said slowly. I'll call Mom. He thought I was finally being useful. He had no idea I was setting the final trap. The next afternoon, I tracked the GPS to Riverside Park on the north side of town. Mark was there, sitting on a bench near the pond. I stayed in my car across the street, sunglasses on, watching through the binoculars I'd bought specifically for this purpose. Mark was meeting the blonde woman from the photo, Valerie. But I didn't see a lover's embrace like I'd expected. Instead, I watched Valerie hand Mark a thick manila folder, and Mark handed her an envelope bulging with cash. She didn't look at him with affection or passion. She looked professional, almost bored. She wasn't a mistress. She was something else entirely. When Mark left 10 minutes later, I made my move. I pulled my car up next to Valerie's silver sedan, just as she was opening her door. How much is he paying you to find dirt on me? I asked calmly, rolling down my window. Valerie froze, her hand on the door handle. Her eyes went wide with surprise. I'm a private investigator, Mrs. Miller. I don't discuss my clients. Her voice was professional but uncertain. She hadn't expected this confrontation. I smiled at Valerie, keeping my voice steady and confident. I'll triple whatever he's paying you. And I'll give you the evidence to put him away for fraud, embezzlement, and domestic abuse, so you don't have to get your hands dirty with his schemes. Valerie looked at the envelope Mark had just given her, then back at me. I could see her mind working, calculating the odds and the profit. She was a businesswoman first, and loyalty wasn't part of the transaction. He's paying me $5,000 to build a case that you're mentally unstable, she admitted finally. He wants documentation for a power of attorney hearing. My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. Mark wasn't just stealing my money. He was trying to have me declared incompetent. I'll pay you $20,000, I said. Right now. Cash. And you'll tell me everything he's planning. Valerie studied me for a long moment, then smiled slowly. I always preferred working for the wife anyway. They're usually smarter. She slid into my passenger seat and pulled out her own folder. Let me tell you what your husband has been up to, Mrs. Miller. And trust me, it's worse than you think. 2 days later, Toby called Mark in a complete panic. His voice was so loud I could hear it from the hallway where I was pretending to organize the linen closet. The IRS is here, Mark. Right now. They're in my office with the ledgers. They have the transfer logs. How did they get those logs? I heard papers rustling as Mark paced frantically in the kitchen. I don't know, Toby. Just stay calm and don't say anything stupid. They're asking about you. They have your signature on documents. Mark, what did you do? Toby's voice was rising toward hysteria. Just burn the ledger. Get rid of everything, Mark shouted, then immediately seemed to realize how that sounded. Wait, no, don't burn anything. But Toby had already hung up. I sat on the hallway floor, filing my nails calmly as I listened to Mark slam his phone against the wall. The plastic case shattered, pieces scattering across the tile. He was finally feeling the panic, the helplessness, the loss of control. It was a beautiful sound. Everything okay? I called out innocently. Fine, he shouted back, his voice cracking. Everything's fine. That evening, Valerie sent me an encrypted file to my secure email. I opened it in the locked bathroom, my hands shaking as I read. It wasn't just sedatives in the tea. Mark had been paying a disgraced doctor named Dr. Raymond Shin for months to get access to cognitive impairment drugs, medications that would make me confused, forgetful, and genuinely unable to function properly. He wasn't just trying to make me sleep. He was trying to build a medical case that I was mentally deteriorating, that I needed a guardian, that I was unfit to manage my own affairs. The file included prescriptions filled under fake names, payment receipts, and even Mark's handwritten notes about dosages and effects. Subject showing increased confusion after week 2, one note read. Memory lapses becoming more frequent. He'd been documenting my decline, like I was some kind of lab experiment. My hand shook as I read the report. He didn't just want the money, he wanted to erase my mind, my independence, my entire identity. This wasn't theft. This was a calculated attempt to destroy me completely. I closed the file and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired, but her eyes were hard with determination. I invited Evelyn and Toby over for a strategy dinner the following evening. I told them we needed to discuss how to handle the bank investigation as a family. I cooked Mark's favorite meal, beef bourguignon with roasted potatoes and fresh bread. I made sure to serve it in the same blue bowls we used every Sunday for family dinners. The atmosphere was thick with tension as we all sat around the table. Mark looked like a ghost, pale and jumpy, flinching at every sound of a car passing by outside. Toby kept checking his phone nervously, probably expecting another call from the IRS. Evelyn tried to maintain her usual superiority, but even she seemed uneasy. We're a family, I said, raising my wine glass in a toast. My voice was steady and calm. And families keep secrets, don't they? They protect each other no matter what. Mark's hand trembled as he lifted his glass. To family, he echoed weakly. They all drank. They had no idea that this was their last supper as free people. Tomorrow, everything would change. As we sat there eating, making uncomfortable small talk about the weather and Emma's school performance, I pulled out my phone casually. I want to play something for you all, I said, setting it on the table. A recording I found really interesting. But it wasn't music. It was the audio from Chapter 10, the conversation between Mark and Evelyn from the hidden camera. By the time she realizes the bank can't find the hackers, we'll be in the Caribbean. She's too broken to fight. Mark's voice filled the dining room, followed by Evelyn's cold laughter. I always knew you married beneath you, darling. But at least her inheritance was useful. The sound of Mark's triumphant chuckle played next. See ya, Lydia. The recording continued for 3 full minutes. Every damning word, every cruel laugh, every piece of their conspiracy. Evelyn turned a sickly shade of gray, her fork clattering onto her plate. Mark's face went from pale to red as the blood rushed to his head. Toby just stared at the phone, his mouth hanging open in shock. The truth was finally out on the table, served up like dessert. Lydia, I can explain, Mark stammered, pushing back from the table. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. That recording is out of context. You don't understand, but Toby was faster, his face twisted with betrayal and anger. You told me she was in on it. You said this was her idea to save the business, that she wanted to move the money. He lunged across the table at his brother, grabbing Mark's collar. Plates crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces. You set me up. The IRS thinks I'm the mastermind. Evelyn jumped to her feet, trying to separate her sons. Boys, stop it. We can fix this. Mark shoved Toby back hard. You idiot. You were supposed to keep quiet. Now look what you've done. What I've done. Toby screamed. You're the one who dragged me into your scheme. The perfect family was tearing each other apart right in front of me, exactly as I'd planned. I sat back in my chair, took a sip of my wine, very clean, very safe wine, and watched the show. Years of resentment and greed were exploding like fireworks. It was almost poetic. The doorbell rang, cutting through the chaos like a knife. Everyone froze. Mark's eyes went wide with sudden fear. "Is that the bank?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. I smiled, setting down my wine glass carefully. "Not exactly." I walked calmly to the front door and opened it wide. Two police officers stood there in full uniform, along with a woman in a dark suit, Detective Sarah Morrison from the State Investigator's Office. "Come in," I said warmly. "I've been expecting you." I handed Detective Morrison the sealed evidence bag containing the mug from the first night, the one with Mark's fingerprints and the drug residue I'd preserved carefully. Then I gave her the medical records Valerie had provided, the bank statements Rebecca had compiled, and the GPS tracking data showing all of Mark's movements. "My husband has been systematically poisoning me with sedatives and cognitive impairment drugs," I said, my voice steady and clear. "He's been attempting to have me declared mentally incompetent, so he could steal my inheritance and our joint assets. And I have comprehensive evidence to prove every single word." Mark's face went completely white as the officer pulled out handcuffs. As the officer snapped the cuffs around Mark's wrists, he started screaming desperately. "It doesn't matter. I still have the money. It's already offshore. You'll never see a dime of it." His voice was high-pitched with panic and rage. I walked up to him slowly, leaning in close enough to smell the fear on his skin. My voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but every word was crystal clear. "Check the Cayman account one more time, Mark. I didn't just switch the mugs that first night. I switched the routing numbers on the mirrored account too. That money you've been moving? It went straight into a restricted trust fund for Emma's education. You've been laundering your own stolen cash back into our daughter's college fund for 3 days straight. The fund is legally protected and you can't touch it. You're completely broke." His face went through 5 different expressions in 3 seconds: confusion, disbelief, horror, rage, and finally, crushing defeat. You couldn't have." "Rebecca helped me set it up," I continued. "Every transaction is documented. Every penny is traceable. And it's all evidence of your fraud." Mark's knees buckled and the officer had to hold him up. "You bitch," he whispered. "I loved you." Evelyn tried to scream at me, her face contorted with fury and fear, but I simply handed her a legal notice that Rebecca had prepared. "Since you signed as a guarantor for the equity loan Mark took out on our house, and since that loan is now in default due to his arrest for fraud and domestic abuse, your house is now collateral. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises." I watched as she read the document, her hands shaking so badly the paper rustled. "You can't do this. That's my home. You should have thought about that before you helped your son try to destroy me," I said calmly. "Consider it payment for 10 years of condescension." She collapsed into a chair, all the arrogance finally drained from her face like water from a broken vase. Mark was let out in handcuffs, his head down, his expensive shoes dragging on the floor. He didn't look back. Toby was taken in for questioning about the IRS investigation and the money laundering. Evelyn sat alone in my dining room, surrounded by the ruins of dinner, crying into her hands. I stood in the doorway and watched them all fall. Justice felt heavy and solid, like a weight I'd been carrying for years, finally settling into place. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized in record time. Morality clauses and documented abuse are beautiful things in family court. Mark is serving 5 years for domestic battery, fraud, and attempted financial exploitation. Toby cut a deal with the IRS and is in a halfway house, working off his debt to society. Evelyn lost her house and moved into a small apartment across town. We don't speak. I sold her former property and used the money to start a foundation for women escaping domestic financial abuse. Emma and I live in a new house now, one that's truly ours with no dark memories attached. The trust fund I created has grown with careful investments. She'll never have to worry about college or her future. I'm sitting on my new porch on a Sunday morning, watching the sun rise over the lake. The air smells clean and fresh, like possibility. I pick up a cup of tea, steam rising in the cool morning air. Chamomile, my favorite. I take a sip slowly, savoring the taste. It's perfectly sweet, exactly how I like it. No metallic aftertaste, no white residue, no hidden poison. Just peace. I never look back at what was. I only look forward to what's coming. And for the first time in 10 years, I'm completely, utterly free.